Call the April 8th Plan Commission meeting to order. Ms. X, please call the roll.
Mayor Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Hogan? Here. Commissioner Burkhart? Here. Commissioner Haley? Here. City Engineer Morrow?
Here.
Alderwoman Hanneman?
Here.
Commissioner Leon?
Here. We have a quorum. Please rise and join the Pledge of Allegiance.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item on the agenda is approval of the regular meeting minutes of August 18th. Any additions or corrections? Second. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item C is Unified Development Ordinance Rewrite Task Force Presentation, Diagnosis, Review of the UDO Project by Houseo Levine. Mr. Martinez.
Yeah, just a brief introduction. Good evening, Mayor. So tonight we have the Room and Chill from Houseo Levine and J.B. Hines from Virtually Planning to present the first workshop that we have about the actual draft UDO sections and review of the proposed articles. The last was about the diagnosis and the preliminary recommendations. Now we are entering to the widths of the UDO itself. We will hold 3 workshops of the UDO sections, and this is the first one. So, Robin.
Great. Can everyone hear me like this? Great. Well, thank you and good evening, Commissioners. Our team is glad to be here with the first 4 articles drafted of the Unified Development Ordinance. 4 articles drafted of the Unified Development Ordinance update. As Regulo mentioned, thank you. I think this will work here. I think this will work here. As Regulo mentioned, great. The last time we reviewed together as a group was in February of this year to review the preliminary diagnosis and recommendations regarding the Unified Development Ordinance. So at that point, it was all recommendations and conceptual, high-level recommendations that we would then proceed in writing that would inform the Unified Development Ordinance rewrite. Tonight, we have the draft articles one present and discuss together and get feedback on. So that is the goal of tonight. The agenda here is we'll first go over introductions once more and then go through the draft UDO articles 1 through 4, establishment of districts, district-specific standards, and finally use-specific standards. And we'll cover next steps in the process. Let's see. And here we have our project team. You've seen this all before. Tonight we have myself and J.B. Hines here joining me. You've met Jackie Wells, senior planner with Houseo Levine before. And back in the office, we have John House.
Hey, Ruben.
Yes.
Those are all informative, but we got a long agenda, so.
That is right. So we will proceed to look at the first 4 articles here now. Proposed UDO structure, we've seen this before, all 12 articles, just the first 4 tonight. So Article 1 is general provisions, and in this draft article we've consolidated several sections of the ordinance that specify title, purpose, intent, jurisdiction, provisions regarding vested intent, jurisdiction, provisions regarding vested rights and severability clauses, the provisions that set up the defensibility and interpretation of the UDO as a whole. Together at the beginning of the document, we haven't made any major revisions at this point to that article, just a reorganization. Article.
How do you want to do this? You want to do, because I do have some issues on this. How do you want to do this?
Please stop me at any.
How do you want to do this?
Please stop me at any point if any of the commissioners would want to jump in with questions.
Just want, okay, all right. Under L, I'd suggest changing the word restrict to control. I just don't like the word restrict. The word restrict to control. I just don't like the word restrict in a document like this because it implies inflexibility. Likewise, under 15-106, and I hate this numbering system, construction of the UDO at the end of the line, it says all building structures and use. There's exceptions down towards the bottom. So I'm wondering if the word permit is appropriate or too restrictive. This, you guys can work this out in the future, but similarly under paragraph C, or certificate of occupancy, I think both of those are a little restrictive, a little late down the line. Just give it. JB's got a question.
Well, not a question. The point of this is to protect anybody who had sought and gained approval that might affect them have taken place.
Right, and I'm saying it's too restrictive to that. That requires a building permit to be issued in order to protect the applicant, rather than an application being submitted. And approved, yeah.
Pending application.
So my old UDO, unless they ask to go with the new one. And this says, unless you've got a building permit issued, you're not protected. That's the way I read it.
More typically, it's if your application is in the door when the old one is in place.
That's the way we'd like it,
applies.
I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, all right, that's it. And that's throughout that section.
Building permit's okay, but that B is the problem there.
Okay, yeah, we can make that change.
B is the issue.
The exception is if it's for very short. Okay, sorry.
Okay. That is covered. Okay. That is covers Article 1. Were there any other questions or thoughts on Article 1?
Thank you. I've gone through this in great detail, and I have lots of notes and comments and questions. I don't really think that we want to go through each and every one of them here and now. It's an opportunity where I might be able to sit with the planners and talk through some of this stuff. Literally, I have lots. It's a very good document. It's a very good document. Beyond typos, there's many questions that I have that I don't know if they're right until somebody gives me the answer of why they're in there. I'm ready now.
There you go.
Okay. So the point is I don't think anybody wants to sit through it all, and I'm not inclined to go through my pages of notes at this point in time. Is there some other venue where I can, again, sit down with the consultants and an informal basis and go through this, or? Yeah, in particular, the zoning map, which is still rife with inaccuracies, mistakes. Okay, we'll talk about that then.
One thing that we've done in the past is have, that we can then take and incorporate the things that are straightforward to incorporate, that might just take a sort of edit from our team, and then come back with the city, with staff, or at a subsequent meeting, like discuss a little bit more. So if there would be a way to send your comment along, then we might proceed like that.
You want to type them up?
I would need a live copy of the document that I could redline strike out. May not be issues if I have the answer to them right away.
I'm fine with regular wants to. I think we could, I volunteer as tribute if there's zoning questions. I mean, just to talk through some of the more procedurally stuff.
Maybe we can have
Yeah, we
Commissioner
can
Haley
certainly do that.
talk, just call one of you on the phone and go through it.
Or sit down, we could knock through it.
Well, they're from Chicago,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, we could.
Whatever works. Yes.
Regular,
If you want to,
over the-
if, yes. Regular, if you want to, if staff and mayor want to organize that,
Okay.
it's totally fine within my
Okay.
scope. I'm happy to.
Okay, good.
Yep.
So what we'll do is we'll arrange a meeting, whether it's on phone or in person, between any commissioner that wants to talk, except for we can't violate. Any commissioner that wants to talk, except for we can't violate open records, open meetings
Right.
laws. So, see, after 20 some odd years, you finally trained me. Mr. City Attorney.
And with ongoing workload, I first received this when the agenda packet went out, and have not had a chance. So I speed read through it.
As did I.
I didn't.
So you're okay with working with the regular and getting it taken care of that way?
That's fine.
Alderwoman Hanneman.
And I do agree with Commissioner Haley. I have a lot of notes too, probably not as many as he does. But, you know, just some general comments, like just as an example on page, just like there's 3 different styles of the phrase moderately low densities in terms of like where the dash is falling or the hyphen. We either have a hyphen, we don't have a hyphen. Sometimes it's between low in density, and sometimes it's between moderately low. And in that, so those are just things that I mainly have. But again, I think some questions that deserve some further. And maybe you could answer this one right now. So on page 4, the BMU South 27th Street Mixed Use District. I know there are a lot of design standards that were put into that overlay district, and I feel like condensing it down to one paragraph. So is that going to be expanded upon further in the document? With
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
Okay, that helps.
These
That'll
are
be-
your purpose statements.
Okay.
This is the elevator speech, typically to a
Okay.
judge, of what's the purpose of this district.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman, let me jump in on that. On that particular paragraph, I'm on paragraph 4, the BMU.
Yeah.
On that particular paragraph, I'm on paragraph 4, the BMU.
Yeah.
Zoning district, page 3 of 5 on section 2.
Mm-hmm.
It references specifically South 27th Street, along South 27th, given to South 27th Street, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure that we want to limit, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure that we want to limit that zoning district language to just 27th Street, because I can see it being used elsewhere in the city.
Good point.
Well, the thing is that the existing South 27th district and this, the existing South 27th district and this proposed district correspond to the corridor plan that is specifically for South 27th Street.
I stand by my statement. I don't see any issues with the 27th Street corridor standard that couldn't be applied at some other district. 27th Street corridor standard that couldn't be applied at some other district, some other mixed-use district. Personal opinion. You can vote on it later, right? But if you got a mixed use, here we go again, right? You can do a BMU 27 if you want to be specific. So, okay, that's it for me. Anybody else? Mr. City Engineer.
A general question. I've been debating whether start at the beginning or finish up with it. Since we have a pause in the action, let me ask it here. As I was reading through this, the thought is that, hey, I don't remember this in our existing, so it's like, is it really that close? But the question is, how do we plan to talk about the changes, or how is this different than our existing UDO? I'm thinking about trying to train staff. You know, I mean, basically, I'm going to hand them a new document. It'd be nice if I had something that, here's how this is different, here's how it is like. Probably those of us that don't use it as often, it might be nice to point out the things that are, you know, this is a completely new concept compared to our existing document, or this is very much like what we have in our existing document. How easy or hard is that to document, to convey to us, so as we read through these documents, but it's already there? Or, well, this is something completely new and different, I should really read this paragraph in more detail. Do you guys ever do anything like that to get people to transition from an old document to a new document?
JB, can you pull the mic towards you, please?
Yeah. Behold. Yes and no. The full red line is, important for tracking changes, but not useful in the way that you're speaking of.
Right.
I think, Ruben, useful in the way that you're speaking of.
Right.
I think, Ruben, you're going to be pointing out some of the key changes, like consolidation of the residential districts, the floodplain standards, as we go through this tonight. Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting, but the first time you're here,
yeah.
Sorry for interrupting, but the first time you're here, you basically said, we're going to take these residential districts, and now they're going to be this one. And that was kind of nice to be able to see the link between the old and the new, and how they're, how you were parsing that apart.
Mm-hmm.
How you were parsing that apart.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, that's your
And
presentation.
that was as an example, but
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so the ordinance text, as it's written, doesn't include a graphic that shows which of the existing residential districts are kind of going into the new ones, but we do have those maps that show the existing zoning within the proposed districts, and sort of a high level of which districts are going into the new proposed ones. So they're not part of the draft ordinance itself as we drafted it here, but we can definitely provide those.
Yeah.
As we drafted it here, but we can definitely provide those.
Yeah, I don't think I'm asking for it to be part of the new document, but how do we transition from the old to the new to quickly understand the differences, I guess. Mm-hmm. I apologize for interrupting her. I think she was probably on a track to maybe answer my question in more detail. Just for interrupting her, I think she was probably on a track to maybe answer my question in more detail. No? Okay. Sorry.
Mr. City Attorney.
What jumped out at me doing the speed read was Article 2, and on the run, it appeared that the entire city of Franklin will have to be rezoned. And Marion's nodding her head yes. And my recollection from around 1998, one of the reasons the C1 district throughout the city still remains is because the city did not want to rezone the entire city. Every property owner gets noticed in some way, then it gets rezoned by the property owner. So this is a huge undertaking.
Yeah,
And in terms of this,
I don't think it's quite all new. And I do think you've got some maps in here that can show these suggestions. I think we make clear in the diagnostic that you have a proliferation of zoning districts. You have a lot of property owners with non-conforming to the GIS analysis that they've been doing to get to this. Yes, it's an undertaking. It also is one that could greatly benefit a lot of your property owners who are stuck as non-conforming uses through no fault of their own.
how many non-conforming uses
That's
are
what
there?
Ruben can talk about their GIS work.
lot sizes and, or the portion of lots within the districts that don't conform with the existing lot sizes and width standards, and did some revising of those standards. Standards kind of fit the existing development patterns more. And also, we have those numbers in the diagnostic report itself that we had discussed, and we're glad to provide that again. And we did some of the map tweaking. The adjustments to the map itself based on existing uses to make existing uses that might be non-conforming in the current district conform. So that might be non-conforming in the current district conform. So that was sort of the approach there. And it's something that we'll continue to do, is sort of fine-tune the zoning map. But that was the approach to adjust. The district width and area standards to reduce nonconformities and to reduce nonconforming uses, just based on the current use. And as far as rezoning goes, we did do some figuring in the diagnostic phase to determine the exact number of parcels in each district that would be under the proposed zoning map, which we do have in these maps. We're glad to provide. But some of the major adjustments to the zoning map are really just changing the deviation scheme of the zoning districts. So that RSE, Suburban Estate Residential, is essentially the R3 that exists now. There really isn't much change to the uses allowed, the dimensional standards, setbacks.
Correct.
Yeah.
Goes from R3, whatever.
Yes. Just adding a comment that I recall that when former planning manager Heath Eddy presented the options about the UDO, the first option was no action, and so the Plan Commission selected the full rewrite. So that's why this project, this proposal is in some cases eliminating zoning districts. So it's up because it's a full revision of the UDO.
It appears that all the districts are changed or eliminated, and they're all new districts. That's why I said rezone the entire city.
I do think it's important to distinguish between renaming a district and creating a new one, for consistency's sake. If it does not if it does not change the uses and the dimensional standards, I don't believe that changing the name of the district constitutes a rezoning.
Well, absent the terms of the new district being a mirror of the new district, being a mirror image of what it is right now, which I doubt, it's a rezone. You're letting more different kinds of properties or whatever, and it has more standards in it, is my guess, which is different than standards in it, is my guess, which is different than the existing district.
I don't believe if we look at the detail that you'll find that that's universally the case.
That might be something to look at the legal precedent for, but we have passed zoning ordinances in the past that were essentially a change in the district title, but not a significant change in the types of uses allowed or the dimensional standards, and had those types of things passed. I believe even a couple in Wisconsin we could point you, send as well, that a change to the district title doesn't really constitute a rezoning. But that's something we can definitely look at together.
Change my zoning.
Yeah.
That's something that certainly can come up, and the important thing to bring up at that point is there isn't a major change to the type of uses, if any at all, that are permitted on a given piece of property if we switch it from the district title from our family residence district. The title changes, but the type of use that's allowed, if someone were to apply for a land use permit, the type of use they could do is really not changing. The setbacks really aren't changing. The lot widths and area stand, but it really doesn't result in a significant change in the type of development allowed.
Well, it's different requirements, lot width, and that's a zoning district. And just off the top of my head, with regard to existing numerous legal non-conforming uses, I'm looking at who's been developing residential subdivisions for 3+ decades, and 3+ decades ago, the population of the city was somewhere approaching 20,000. Now it's in the 35, 36 realm. It's almost double. I dare say 536 realm. It's almost double. I dare say that all the subdivisions that were developed, all of those are conforming lots, or they wouldn't be there because they were approved over time, as opposed to pre-existing. Or somebody not getting inspected when they build a new house.
We can certainly send the maps of those non-conforming lots. Again,
They were in the diagnostic number. They were in the diagnostic number.
Again, and there are, to your point, there are many subdivisions that are conforming with the existing standards currently.
Okay. I got something here in a minute, but first we're going to go to Commissioner Leone here in a minute, but first we're going to go to Commissioner Leone, who is down here. Commissioner Leone.
With due regard to my fellow commissioners, I believe we're starting to pick apart the proposal before the task force has been able to give their full presentation. I would like to see the rest of the presentation before we get into, I think we're on page 3 or 4.
3 of.
So I'd like to see the rest of the presentation and maybe save questions until they're done presenting.
And that's a slightly different take on what I was about to say. Let's postpone, because we got people with business items here that really don't want to see this.
I agree with that. I'd even propose tabling the rest of this presentation until after the, what are we, D1 and...
You don't want to use that language, though.
Okay.
Business items at hand. So with that, we're going to move on to item D1, public hearing on a proposed amendment of boundaries. And SR is in another room. Adding a small industrial parcel to the south side and gives us a modified developers agreement. Mr. Martinez. I'm sorry, let's do it. Commissioner Burkhart.
I'll be abstaining from D1 and E1 on the agenda.
Okay, for the record, we still have quorum.
Sure, I have a hard copy.
Okay. Mr. Tate, it's Todd, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Tate, it's Todd, right?
That's correct, Mayor. Would you like me to give a quick overview?
Mine like a steel trap. First, we have to do the public hearing notice, please. Ms. X.
Notice is hereby given that the Plan Commission of the City of Franklin will hold a public hearing on September 8th, 2022. Of the City of Franklin will hold a public hearing on September 8th, 2022 at 7 p.m. The meeting will be held in Franklin City Hall, located at 9229 West Loomis Road in Council Chambers. The hearing will be held to provide the public a reasonable opportunity to comment on the proposed amendment boundaries of Tax Incremental District Number 6 and the proposed amendments to its project Incremental District Number 6 and the proposed amendments to its project plan. The proposed amendment would add territory to the district as permitted under Wisconsin Statute Section 66.1105 parentheses 4H2. The proposed amended boundary is identified on the map included in this notice. Based on the planned use of the properties within the district was previously identified as suitable for mixed-use development. Projects to be undertaken within the district and costs to be incurred, project costs, will continue to be for the purpose of promoting mixed-use development and will include payment of cash grants as development incentives to the owners, lessees, or developers of land located within the district. 66.11054H1. The list of estimated project costs and the current project plan would be amended and increased by approximately $459,000. All interested parties will be given a reasonable opportunity to comment on the proposed amended boundaries of the district and the proposed amendments. Description of the proposed amended boundary is available for public inspection and will be provided upon request during normal business hours at the office of the city clerk in Franklin City Hall, 9229 West Loomis Road, and can also be viewed on the city's website. Supporting materials are posted for the September 7th Joint Review Board meeting and the September 8th Plan Commission meeting.
Ines, what are we talking about? And then we'll go to Mr. Taves.
Actually, Mr. Todd from Ehlers, the consulting, is presenting this item.
Mr. Taves.
And we had a deck of slides, but it sounds like that might not be queued up, so I'm going to paraphrase briefly and then happy to get into greater detail on any questions you may have. So number 6, and the commissioners were provided with a copy of the...
Regular. Click on this slide.
No, this presentation does not include this item. This is separate.
That slide includes a map of what we're talking about.
That might help if we at least have a map.
Slide includes a map of what we're talking about.
That might help if we at least have a map.
Right. Yeah, I can go to the materials. This is, yep, but I have it here. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Public? Yep. And just open that Public? Yep. And just open that Ehlers slides there from the bottom. Ehlers. Yep. Thank you.
Perfect. So this is tax increment district number 6, existing district created in 2018. As of the first of this year, it had incremental value of $2.72 million. all told, including territory that was added via an amendment that was undertaken in 2020. There is 233 acres. This is again a mixed-use district, so a combination of residential, commercial, and industrial development. And this table shows the relative breakdown divided fairly evenly between the three various purposes to this amendment. The first is to add territory. This is a fairly minor amendment. There was a certified survey map approved and recorded earlier this year that now causes the TID boundary to no longer follow the parcel lines. This is primarily intended to correct that situation. The lot in question is the site for the Rise Commercial District. In the plan, we also just update and refresh the numbers. I think in the hearing notice, it indicated that there was an increase in project cost, but as we've continued to work on this, ultimately, we now anticipate that the plan will require about $380,000 less in expenditures than the last amendment. This is the physical geography. That is the portion of the new parcel that is not presently within the tax increment district that will be brought in this amendment so that it aligns with the TID boundary, 8.42 acres in total. This parcel is suitable for commercial development. Restated 0.9, so again, there's that $380,000 drop, showing then again the variation in the individual line items. In terms of prospective development, again, I mentioned $2.7 million on the ground as of the first of this year. The nearer-term development that is projected in the exhibits, Field Trail condos, along with a few single-family lots, the Rise development, and other potential commercial and industrial development. Through the end of the 2026 construction season, we're presently anticipating the creation of roughly $86 million in tax increment. Exhibit from the plan, but the thing I wanted to point out here, recognizing it's not particularly legible, is that if the district were to remain open for its entire 20-year life at a constant tax rate, that development on the previous table would generate roughly $27 million over the life of the district. When we run that through the cash flow, along with the guarantee payments that are covered in several agreements that the city has with developers in the district, we end up with roughly $43.2 million in projected revenues over the 20-year life. We have city debt service, most of which is already in place. The agreement as proposed to be modified includes two municipal revenue obligations with projected total payments of roughly $6.4 million. We take out the capital that was funded roughly $6.4 million. We take out the capital that was funded primarily by the bond proceeds. And what this all tells us is that we would expect cumulative revenues to be greater than the accumulated liabilities by the year 2033. So while this is a 20-year max life district, we are projecting presently that it can close in 13 years or roughly 10 years from now. And lastly, just the schedule. We will be presuming the commission advances this evening, and we'll go to the council on the 20th, and then we've scheduled a joint review board meeting for the week thereafter to complete the process. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Todd. Director of Administration Stino, do you have anything to add?
I think maybe just to add, not necessarily germane to this conversation, but the council is considering an amendment to the district, to the development agreement that's being considered by the council at this point. But basically, it's just maybe running aside of this process, not really part of this process. So the amendment is simply, as Todd said, a very small territory amendment to the existing TID.
Geography. Our public hearing notice asks us to ask the developer if they have anything that they want to present before we open a public hearing.
SR Mills, 4011 80th Street, Kenosha. Appreciate the consideration on this. I think it cleans up an issue. We have a great business, a new member of the community in Rise, and they needed a bigger site. So it was a bit of accommodate what they needed. But we think they're excited. They've closed on the site and looking forward to breaking ground. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Okay, we have a properly noticed public hearing. We also have a presentation from the applicant, which is the city, and the developer, and so territory amendment. Is there anyone wishing to speak? Seeing no one rise, I will also note that there's a letter from Joseph Arsencata, an attorney for the plaintiffs in the lawsuit, Franklin, was it objecting to the addition of the property. We'll have a copy of it for you in a matter of moments. And with that, anyone else wishing to speak? I will close the public hearing on this matter. Questions from the commission? Commissioner Leon. Oh, wait a minute. It requires that you push the button, but I'll push it for you.
Thank you, Mayor. Certainly want to see the letter that the city administrator is copying now before we vote. Really a simple question. This is copying now before we vote. Really a simple question. This is the second amendment to this TID. I understand it's territorial, but is it reasonable to expect that this would be the last amendment to this TID? Or, I'm seeing some chuckles. Is it potentially future amendments that could keep this going? I would go to the applicant, which is the city, but the representative here tonight.
Mr. Mills?
I think we discussed some additional land. I think we discussed some additional lands potentially with some of the sewer service area and the expansion. It was decided that at this time that this is probably, as far as our initiative, this would be really it. If I think this would be, I think state statute is, state statute is 3 or 4 TID amendments. So hypothetically, there could be 2 more, but certainly with our appetite and with what we're doing right now, I think this would suffice. With that said, if there's a great industrial user and they needed more land, we never want to rule it out, but
sure. Thank you.
Sure.
We'll take a moment here a second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so my question now would be to city attorney, and I'm specifically looking at the last full paragraph where he says that the project plan is arbitrary and inaccurate, that the objection by FCA has been made to the city, federal court action, and that they're objecting to the validity of TID number 6. Can you speak to, I know you didn't write this letter, but can you speak to what they're discussing where the plan is arbitrary and inaccurate, and maybe explain, I assume it's not.
Mr. State Attorney.
I agree that it is not. With regard to the arguments, those were posed in litigation, and the general standard on this end is to not comment on matters in pending litigation, litigations. disagree that the creation of the district and everything thereafter is in any way arbitrary and inaccurate.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
And the city of Franklin has received the consulting services from Ellers, which is among the top, if not the top, tax incremental district consultant statewide.
So I guess I would just say that from what I'm hearing from the city attorney, the city of Franklin has done due diligence in this TID project.
Correct. Okay, any other questions for staff? Mr. City Engineer? Right, you will. I pushed the button too many times.
To amplify or clarify that if we don't do this, then we have to exclude the other part that's in, the current part that's in the TID. So you either have to take it in or leave it out. In either way, we would have to modify the boundary, which would count for number 2 of our force structure. So therefore, we would be losing revenue because we'd have to take this part out.
Anyone else? Mr. City Attorney?
And I did bring this up with Mr. Taves at the Joint Review Board meeting yesterday, but with regard to the project plan, the attorney, with regard to the compliance of the project plan with Wisconsin Statute 66.1105, I did the review and did prepare and sign the letter on September 6th, 2020 packet. I'll pass these out so you can have a copy of it.
And I have received that letter yesterday, and it's on file.
Right, I hand-delivered the original to the mayor.
Okay. With that, the resolution designating proposed amended boundaries and approving a project plan amendment for tax incremental district number 6, City of Franklin, Wisconsin. City Engineer Morrow, seconded by Commissioner Leone. Mr. City Attorney.
I think Commissioner Haley had a comment on the resolution. Commissioner Haley had a comment on the resolution. It's very minor. It's
Commissioner Haley.
It's
Question on the resolution, fourth whereas, sub A, ag territory from the district as permitted under Wisconsin statutes. Territory from the district as permitted under Wisconsin statute section. My guess is that wants to say territory to the district rather than from.
Where? Which paragraph is that?
Say that again, please, Kevin.
Change from to. Ag territory to the district. To. Ag territory to the district.
Oh,
Where?
under the sub
A.
under the fourth whereas, change from to. Is that part of your motion, Mr. City Engineer? That correction?
Yes.
And Commissioner Leone?
Yes.
Both indicate aye. Ms. Hex, let's just call the roll.
Who made the motion? Seconded by,
Commissioner Leone.
thank you. Mayor Olson?
I vote only to affect the outcome.
Commissioner Hogan?
Aye.
Commissioner Burkhart?
Abstains?
Commissioner Haley?
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman?
Aye.
Commissioner Leon?
Aye.
With that vote, the motion carries 5 ayes, no noes, 1 abstention, and no absence. Motion carries. Thank you, Pat. Okay, let's do the next one. Strauss Brands Processing. It's a time extension for their special use application. The suggestion by the city attorney is that we go to closed session. We've done this once before. Is there a desire?
I have generally said I prefer not doing closed sessions.
Okay. Mr. Martinez, can you give us the highlights, then we'll have that conversation again.
Yeah, as you know, the special use permit and site plan for the Strauss Brands project is on pending litigation. So that's why it was extended a year ago for 1 year, and this is the second extension because under the pending litigation is a reasonable expectation that the special use permit and site plan be extension, special use permit and site plan be extended. This extension was not requested by the applicant. So I'm happy to answer any question that you may have, and city attorney may have additional comments.
Any questions? Commissioner, or Alderwoman?
Thank you, Mayor. Wondering if there is any limit onto the number of extensions that can be given, or if this can continually be extended year after year after year, should that be necessary? And to that end, an update on what is happening with litigation would be appreciated.
The UDO only says that the special use permits are valid for 1 year, but it's silent about the time extensions and how many.
Okay.
Well, first of all, regarding the extension, not being requested by Mr. Martinez Montilva, the applicant has not withdrawn the application.
Correct.
And number two, there is no limit to time extensions. However, not only within the Unified Development Ordinance, but also the Wisconsin statutes, and I'm speaking in terms of conditional use permits, which is the special use in sub DE number 4, conditional use permit shall remain in effect as long as conditions upon which the permit was issued are followed, but the city may impose conditions such as permits duration, with regard to duration, transfer, or renewal. And with regard to the Unified Development Ordinance, General Standards for Special Uses, Section 15-3.0701, sub G, limitations, an extension of time may be granted by the Common Council upon recommendation of the Plan Commission. Otherwise, no special use permit shall be valid for a period longer than 1 year. And the permit runs with the land and not the applicant. And the permit shall be deemed to relate to and to be for the benefit of and the use and lot involved. So.
Thank you. I have a question. I hope somebody can answer for me. Strauss has publicly expressed their desire to no longer develop here. The property's on the market for sale. Why would we extend their special use permission when they don't want it? They have no intention of continuing to build and pursue this project, and in fact have not asked for the extension to this project, and in fact have not asked for the extension. We have. Why? This, to me, when somebody says, I'm no longer interested, that means you walk on, you move on. They're not wondering. So I'd love to hear an answer. I've torn my brain on this one for a lot, trying to figure out just the city be involved in this.
Well, I'll have the city attorney finish this opine, but he did opine earlier in the evening that they have not withdrawn their application. They have not for this special use. They've been granted it, and that's as far as they've gotten. Action. They've not withdrawn anything. So the city is following through on our responsibility. Mr. City Attorney?
I agree.
Right. I sat here in a meeting where they submitted a letter, says we're not pursuing this anymore, we want to sell it, help us.
It said they were looking for additional time to explore their options.
It's not the option I remember. The point is I don't read the papers, but being in meetings here, we have heard repeatedly, they're not here now, they're not asking for this extension. I just cannot understand why there should be a common sense answer for this. Any other rational entity or person would just say, okay, fine, move on.
Mr. City Attorney.
As I read from the Unified Development Ordinance, the special use runs with the land. If the property is marketed, that's one of the interests that a potential user would be looking at. And the applicant has not withdrawn the application.
How do we know? I guess what I'm trying to understand is,
Because
they came in, they want a
have
meat
not.
processing facility. They said they're no longer interested in building here. Why would we put a special use on the property and let it go for somebody else unless the intention is that some other entity will come in and build a meatpacking facility there? We don't know. We are actually limiting the options. There may be somebody who wants to put a grocery store there or some other meaningful project. Why would we want to tether an existing thing with an option with the SUP? Why does that need to run with the property? Yes, it can, but what's the rationale for it?
It's there. If a different use came in that required some other approvals, that's what would happen.
Okay.
But this is there now, and the applicant has not.
Okay.
But this is there now, and the applicant has not withdrawn the application. And I'll leave it at that with pending litigation ongoing.
There's the $1 million answer. It's subject to pending litigation, and the questions that were being asked have been answered in prior applications. So,
I appreciate what you're saying, but you're not answering my question.
that's correct. We did answer your question, but the follow-on questions are subject to litigation, and I'm not going to answer those. And frankly, I think you already know the answers to them. So anyway.
Well, how would I know the answers to that?
Any other questions? Commissioner Leon?
Go ahead, Floor.
Anything else? Commissioner Leon?
So, again, with due regard to my fellow Commissioner, Commissioner Haley, I think it absolutely is common sense. Commissioner Haley, I think it absolutely is common sense to extend the time period on a previously approved SUP, which, as I recall, you voted against any other time we addressed it. So it sounds to me that it's more so the objection in the SUP that's already been passed. I think it makes sense to common sense to extend that SUP until the application is withdrawn, as the mayor and the city attorney alluded to. And I do have a question to the city attorney, and I believe you actually just addressed it, but just to verify, or having it in place during the original time period does not limit any other applicant to use Commissioner Haley's example, of a grocery store or any other use for that property if another applicant's wanted. Is that correct, Mr. City Attorney?
Whatever the use would be has to comply with existing zoning or would have to apply for new approvals with regard to zoning or a different special use, but that would happen anyway.
But extending this doesn't limit any other
The same approval process, either a new special use permit or a site plan.
So in my opinion, the answers to your questions have been addressed here tonight and also in previous meetings, but with that, I have no other questions about this.
Mr. City Engineer.
I know, begin with, I still feel it was a very good project, and we made it the best we could with the processes we did, and it met all the needs. So since that time, we've had a lot of additional concerns or additional arguments, if you will, as to why it should not have been approved. And I would tell you that I have yet to hear one that makes any sense. In fact, they seem contrary to a lot of the issues at hand. So I'll leave it at that I'm still convinced this was a good project. And I won't reiterate the fact that you just have to keep options open until somebody else closes them. So you just have to keep options open until somebody else closes them. So.
Anybody else? Okay, let's try this. I got two motions. First is relative to the amendment to the special use. Is there a motion to recommend approval of a resolution to amend Resolution 2020? Is there a motion to recommend approval of a resolution to amend Resolution 2021-7788, a resolution to amend Resolution 2020-7681, a resolution imposing conditions and restrictions for the approval of a special use for a meat processing facility use upon a property located at the southwest corner of the intersection of West Loomis Road, use upon a property located at the southwest corner of the intersection of West Loomis Road and the New Monarch Drive, Lot 83 of Ryan Meadows Subdivision, Strauss Brands LLC applicant, to extend the time for commencement of the special use development. Commissioner Leone made the motion. Commissioner Leone made the motion, seconded by Alderwoman Hanneman. Ms. X, let's just do a roll call.
Commissioner Hogan?
Aye.
Commissioner Burkhart?
Abstain.
Abstains. Commissioner Haley?
No.
City Engineer Morrow?
Aye.
Local Plan Commission rules, 4 ayes are necessary to sustain the motion. That has achieved. There was 4 ayes, 1 no, 1 absent. Well, one abstention. With that, the motion carries. The second motion is a motion to adopt a resolution to amend the Resolution 24, a resolution approving a site plan of a meat processing facility with associated cattle pen, harvest floor, carcass coolers, fabrication areas, packaging areas, warehouse areas, shipping docks, operations offices, employee welfare spaces, associated mechanical support facilities and spaces of future entrance drives, the southwest corner of the intersection of West Loomis Road and New Monarch Drive, which is Lot 83 of Ryan Meadows Subdivision, Strauss Brands LLC applicant, to extend the time to commencement of the site plan use development.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Leone, Alderwoman Hanneman.
Commissioner Burkhart abstains. Commissioner Haley?
No.
City Engineer Morrow?
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman?
Aye.
Commissioner Leon?
Aye.
Again, motion carries 2-4 affirmative, 1 opposed, and 1 absent. Motion carries. With that, we'll move on to E2, Cape Crossing Single Family Residential Subdivision and Plan Development District Phase 1.
Stay not absent.
I said
And he has returned now.
yes. Everybody's doing my work for me. That's all right. It's good.
I'm sorry, I heard you all.
It's 8:04 and Commissioner Burkhart has returned to
I heard you all.
It's 8:04 and Commissioner Burkhart has returned to his seat. This is a final plat. Mr.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the final plat for the Cape Crossing development. Just a quick background. This project was presented for a concept review to get Common Council input. Then we have the Plan Development District to allow for different development standards for this project, for example, smaller lots. And then we have the preliminary plat that was smaller lots. And then we have the preliminary plat that was approved. And the preliminary plat has 3 phases. So this is the final plat for phase number 1. So this phase includes a total of 63 lots in this phase, 46 for the villas, that is the south portion of the development, and 17 for the estates, that is the northern. Condition of approval that you will need to submit this letter from the Department of Administration before recording. Then we can just highlight the major issues that we have with this final plat proposal. So that is the the applicant has received a letter from the U.S. Army Corps saying that this wetland is not subject to federal jurisdiction, and the applicant has also received a letter from the DNR accepting an exemption from these regulations. So the applicant is providing the wetland setback and buffer on the north side of the remaining wetland, but not in the south side of the remaining wetland. So according to previous project by the DNR, however, the wetland buffer, a wetland setback protection standards apply from the remaining wetland. So these 2 red lines, the wetland buffer here and the wetland setback here. That's why we're recommending in the resolution a special exception to allow for impacts of this wetland buffer, because in the grading plan they are impacting this wetland buffer area. The applicant is objecting that condition, so we'll let the applicant talk at the end of my presentation. So that is for condition at the end of my presentation. So that is for condition number 10 in natural resource protection. We'll continue to the other issue that the Plan Commission shall provide a recommendation. So we have outlet number 4, that is this triangular outlet here by Ryan Road. So according to the Ryan Creek Trail Plan that was adopted recently, this area here is designated as a future. Future trailhead. Sorry. So what staff is recommending and following the recommendation of the plan is that this outlet number 4 shall be dedicated to the city. If the applicant decides to dedicate this outlet 4, they can provide an assessment of the value of the outlet, and that will be used as a credit for park impact fees. What the applicant is proposing is the reservation, but is reserved for future park. So the city will need to purchase the outlet within 5 years, because that's the standard expiration of a reservation. And the third option, that's not applying in this case, but I just mentioned, space land are directly involved or are not designated, but in this case are designated by the Ryan Creek Trail Plan. So staff recommendation is number 1, dedication. Applicant's proposal is number 2, reservation. However, if the Plan Commission should select number 2, that is a plan that says dedication or reservation. Staff recommend the dedication because if the portion does not happen in 5 years, then we'll lose the opportunity to have the trailhead.
Then there's the small issue if we choose number 2. So
correct. Yeah, and the staff is recommending approval of this final plat with the two notes about the natural resource protection plan that the applicant is objecting one of the conditions, and the staff is asking for the plan commission to select one of these three options about the outlet number 4.
Commissioner Haley.
Thank you. I'm going to try and keep it short. I've expressed my concerns about this project before several times. Many of them have not been addressed, despite the fact that people tell me they've been addressed. They're still not here. I can't support this project. As I look through the UDO rewrite, I'm seeing things we're going to approve out here. I'm seeing things we're going to approve out here that we wouldn't under that rewrite. We won't get into the details, but the point is, this never should have been a PDD. Too many buildings, too much whatever. So we've sidestepped around the natural resources. We're going to ignore the hydric soils around the natural resources. We're going to ignore the hydric soils, the soils reports that said, be aware, and we're just going to go ahead and approve it. As far Outlot 4, I don't know why the city would want it, period. I know it's been dedicated as a trailhead, period. I know it's been dedicated as a trailhead, but the site is 90+% encumbered with easements, with more to come, and our UDO doesn't allow structures being built on easements. Okay, so the whole idea is we take Outlot 4. Oh, and yeah, by the way, we used it to bring in the water main that needs to cross under We Energy's properties and through the site through this emergency pedestrian access. I brought it up. Nobody seems to want to talk about it. The wetland delineation project that's been prepared since we started reviewing this project, significant wetlands. And they're not being shown on these plans because it's not part of the plat of the subdivision. It's land that's owned by somebody else. But yet, we want to put a trail across it. We want to put a sanitary sewer across it. We want to bring a water main through it. And we don't know for a fact that we can. They're there. And I specifically asked, yes, we got answers to all the other wetlands, the one at the street, not this one. Well, it's not our property. We don't need to worry about that. In order for this project to be built as proposed, you will need to basically decimate those wetlands. Find out. I suggest right. So besides all of the bigger problems I have with this, it should have never been a PDD in my opinion, but we're now presented with a final plat. It's moved ahead. Well, I've got two different sets of plans here. One that's labeled overall landscape plan. It's different. It shows landscaping, yes, but it also them out front. I've got another plan that's not labeled, but I'm to assume that this is the plat we're looking to approve. Or is there yet another one to appear? Okay? We're allowing setbacks on side yard setbacks, 7.5 feet. That means houses within 15 feet of each other. Setbacks, 7.5 feet. That means houses within 15 feet of each other. I'm going to ask you to visualize that again. And then think about where you live in Franklin. Can you name me another subdivision where the houses are 15 feet apart? Probably not. So, question I have is, what is the disposition of this trail? It's not showing up on the plat. What is the disposition of this trail? It's not showing up on the plat, the trail out front. It is showing on the landscape plan. We have talked about, is there a need for it if we get the trail right? I understand there's a bigger plan. I'm all about trails. We don't know where the trails are going. On this side, on the south. We don't know where the trails are going. On this side, on the south side, through development. It's something we're stumbling through. And it's just foolhardy to make decisions like this that you live with forever when you haven't answered all the questions. And a lot of people in this room won't be sitting here in 5 years when the neighbors are all PO'd at each other because they're living in each other's backyards. They don't even show in here where, for example, gas, electric, and cable, which every house needs to have, or where do those easements go? So now those are 5-foot backyards. How many people want to live in a backyard that they can't even plant a tree in because it's encumbered with easements and there's a petroleum pipeline right there, and don't dare to plant a tree? So these are all the things, this is me talking, but it's something that our elected officials should be concerned about. This development does not have, certainly if you're going to roll the dice and go down this path, then answer all the questions first. And the questions never got answered. I had 5 to 10 of them. And the answer was, just don't worry about that, or we'll figure something else out. So I can't support this in any way, shape, or form. If we're going to it, so it says final plat, so we know what it is we're approving and what they have to live by, address the issues of where those easements would be, resolve. What do we want Outlot 4? Do we ever want to own that? It's nothing but a utility corridor. It's 10 feet higher than the adjacent grade, uses that as an access point to get to maintain their equipment. So I'm not saying it can't happen. Why are we approving a development that will never come back here again except for phase 2 when we have unanswered questions, and it's probably not in the best interest of Franklin and people that will live here, because my guess is they won't be happy 5 years from now. Once they figure out what's going on, that they've got open hunting on the adjacent land, on state land, that you've got 2 gun clubs firing off all times of the day and night. It's not the sort of place that you want to put a high density development. I know we're not going to talk about density. The sort of place that you want to put a high density development. I know we're not going to talk about density, and I'll stop ranting on that. But by gosh, if you're going to approve it, get it right. Know what it is we're approving, because this is a moving target. And they've got a whole second phase coming that will have all of these issues compounded. Limited access for service vehicles. You've heard me tell all of this before. I'm very disappointed that this continues to move forward in this fashion, and I won't be supporting it in any way. But clean it up if you do. Be supporting it in any way. But clean it up if you do.
Anyone else? Commissioner Leone, push your button, please. And look at that. There you go.
I believe Mr. Martinez said the applicant did object to condition 10, right? And I'd like to hear from
The
final
natural
plat,
resource-
right? And I'd like to hear from
The
final
natural
plat
resource
approval
protection,
for
the
special
NRC
exception.
requirement.
I think maybe the condition was the outlot with our ability to, so. Hi there. Is that better?
Great. Should be on.
Is that better?
Great. Should be on.
Yeah, the condition regarding, is this supposed to be? Regarding the outlot and whether we dedicate it or reserve it, we don't care. I mean, that lot has always been dedicated from when Pat Dempsey owned the land. I mean, it is designed to be your trail. Always been dedicated from when Pat Dempsey owned the land. I mean, it is designed to be your trailhead. It will be your trailhead. Specifically, we didn't dedicate it right now because I don't know if that trail has been approved or if that outlot has been, or the trailhead has been approved. And I'm not sure that you guys want a hunk of land that you're not approved on yet. The other thing is just addressing the park fees, hunk of land that you're not approved on yet. The other thing is just addressing the park fees. We can easily dedicate it on the plat. We would just need to have the development agreement updated to reflect the amount for the park fees. We could do an appraisal and things like that. I mean, the simple math, paid about $22,600 an acre on things like that. I mean, the simple math, paid about $22,600 an acre. This is 26,000 square feet. I mean, the value at the same per acre price of where we purchased the land is $13,680. If we put that in the development agreement as an offset of park fees, we can dedicate it on the plat right now. We have no issue with that. I mean, fees, we can dedicate it on the plat right now. We have no issue with that. I mean, this has always been your outlot. It's just giving it to you, I guess, how you want it, truthfully.
Yeah, so 2 things. I think still needed to hear name and address, but then to the city attorney, correct me if I'm wrong, but because this is natural resource special exception, do we need this or no?
No. This
Okay,
is
all right.
So, and I wasn't actually addressing your question. I just
Right.
wanted to get the easy one out of the way because, it's a non-issue for us. That trailhead is yours when you want it. Sorry, Eric Obarski, Newman Developments, North 27, West 24025, Paul Court.
with regard to this issue, this rolled in yesterday, and I don't believe I ever had to address it. It was a 2017 Wisconsin Act that amended statute, and short part of it, and there are numerous subsection sites preceding this. Local regulation of non-federal or artificial wetlands. If a local government has an effect on the effective date of this subsection, an ordinance or resolution regulating non-federal wetlands or artificial wetlands, the ordinance or resolution does not apply. That rolled in the last 30 hours or whatever. I believe there is, and Mr. Martinez Montilva can correct or confirm that, there is Army Corps of Engineers review letter received that essentially says that the entirety of this wetland area is a non-federal
Yeah, correct.
exempt wetland, and so just the verbatim what I read from this statute, that's going to need a little review. I know that Assistant Planner Marion X has 3 or 4 times on previous projects reviewed this with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, and they say it's not applicable except for areas that are exempted by the DNR as well as already federally exempted. And in this case, if you look at the map on the federally exempted, and in this case, if you look at the map on the screen, it's basically the bottom quarter or so of the entire wetland. And if you see the lines going horizontally on an angle through the yellow portion there, the yellow portion is what DNR exempted and staff's process previously, and as staff had previously confirmed a number of times with DNR, the setback and wetland buffers for the part that enforceable. However, when you read what I read out of the statute, okay, it's an ordinance or resolution regulating non-federal wetlands, and I'm understanding from the Army Corps letter that the entirety of it before this gets to the council.
Yeah, the background on this was, we knew that to make the stormwater work and to be contiguous from the west to the east with the water flowing, there was going to be grading through the bottom part of that wetland. We consulted our wetland engineer. They made a determination to the federal government, and it's the review areas, which include W3 and W4, contain no waters in the United States subject to the Corps. So that's kind of layer one. So what the federal government determined is that this wetland and a little one up front are not federally regulated. Next step is to go to DNR then to get an exemption, saying, okay, DNR, need to grade within it. Here's the amount of work that we need to do. It's 8,000 some hundred odd square feet, and the DNR grants the exemption. The DNR also reiterates, so in the DNR letter, which you guys have dated August 10th, the highlighted portion states from the federal government, the ADJ letter dated May 26th from the U.S. Army Corps indicates that wetland W3 and W4 located in the ADJ review are not waters of the United States. Therefore, the area described as wetland 3 and 4 are not federally jurisdictional. So what the DNR has done is they've concurred with the, we've been in Franklin for 6-7 years now. We know the UDO process and the natural resource exemption process. Our consultants, along with the legal review, say, well, you have a non-federal wetland right now that you've got an exemption to grade through, and you should be good. The DNR has approved your project. Why do we think we're okay? Because of what Jesse just read. Basically, 2017 Wisconsin Act 183 stating, if a local government has in effect on the effective date of this subsection, an ordinance or resolution, do you have an ordinance or resolution, regulating non-federal wetland or non-federal wetlands, the ordinance or resolution does not apply and may not be enforced. So, you know, that's how we got, I mean, we certainly were trying to skirt any NSRPP. It was actually, how do we go about this with the federal government, the DNR, get a proper grading permit and get it approved from the state? So we say, well, you've got a 20 and 30-foot setback now that you're limited grading work within an area that the DNR has already approved for 8,300 square feet of grading. It was a little bit surprising to us because we went through the process here. And I think I think, you know, Marion's very involved in this stuff where you've had these setbacks. I think the question is, were they non-federal? If that wetland right there is not non-federal, I completely agree that you get to put a buffer around it because it very clearly says, you know, local regulation of non-federal or artificial. This is exempt. It doesn't affect just the portion that we're grading that the DNR has said you have the approval to do this work in. All of W3 and W4 are non-federal. And the state act says, you know, if you have a resolution regulating non-federal or artificial wetlands, the ordinance are objecting to that. I mean, we worked our grading around the rest of it. I mean, in the whole scheme of things, if you read that, you're saying really all of wetland 3 and 4 shouldn't have a setback. We worked our plan around that, keeping everything outside. Everything is outside of that the 30-foot setback, the 20-foot buffer, other than the area where that's all we're asking.
So if I may summarize, I'm hearing from the applicant and the city attorney that condition 10 is not needed nor applicable. But that might be slightly inaccurate, but I want to ask a question to staff then. Why do you want condition 10 in there if you could? And I think Ms. X would probably be the right one.
So the discussion this evening, there are 3 levels of regulation over this wetland. It has been determined that it is not regulated by federal regulation, which means that the DNR has jurisdiction over the wetland itself. They do have setbacks and buffers that apply under certain contexts. In this particular case, they're regulating the wetland only. They've opted to exempt a portion of the wetland. That portion is therefore not subject to their requirements. However, their exemption only applies in terms of that being no longer considered a wetland for the purposes of mapping. And it therefore changes the boundary of the wetland. So there's a remaining wetland that still will exist on the site, and the regulations, our local ordinance will exist on the site, and the regulations, our local ordinances still apply to that wetland, to its buffer, and to its setback. So the remaining buffer is what would require the natural resource special exception for any disturbance. It's 100% protection standard. I've had a number of conversations about this topic with the DNR because it does create somewhat of a conflict for developers who you did your due diligence at the DNR level. But they have told me that it does not obviate our local ordinances and protections for that buffer and wetlands. So it does not obviate our standards about buffer or setback. So I think that in this case, given that there is already a condition on the preliminary plat related to protection of natural resources, it's appropriate to maintain the requirement that we continue to protect natural resources under our local standard. We're not totally in agreement about the federal jurisdictional issue, but again, I have discussed this with the DNR and we're going to go back to them and ask for greater clarification on this, but my current understanding is that we can enforce our buffer.
Thank you.
So this wetland is exempt from all our controls.
No.
No, the DNR has let the applicant grade in the checkered areas. But the checkered areas are also the buffers that we require for the wetland above.
Correct.
W3 was deemed non-federal. And I really think that's the key thing here is that even when Marion was talking about the exempted area and that the rest of it is still wetland, that is correct with the rider of it is non-federally regulated wetland. That's what the Army Corps has said, and that's what the DNR has concurred with. And that is the difference. I know it's super tiny, and I know, you probably have to review this, and I think that's the difference between other wetlands. If you have a wetland that did not get a non-federal jurisdiction, as I said, I think that setback is entitled, but the wetland, the non-federal exemption, the non-federal exemption, the non-federal jurisdiction is for the entire wetland. The DNR exemption is for the hashed part. The State Act 183 references local regulation of non-federal or artificial wetlands. Local regulation of non-federal or artificial wetlands. All of W3 is non-federal, even the portion outside of the DNR's exemption area. It's all non-federal. DNR exempted that portion for grading. It's a fine line, but I think it matters 100% in here. It's a fine line, but I think it matters 100% in here.
Mr. State Attorney, and then Alderman Hanneman.
Only that, as I said earlier, it's subject to further review, and the preceding sentence, a local government may not enact an ordinance or adopt a resolution regulating a matter regulated under sub 3N sub D 1 or 3R sub A parent intro or sub AM, et cetera, and there's more, so that's all got to.
Yeah, so I think Jesse is, what we're comfortable doing is saying, we'll accept that condition with the plan commission recommendation, with the intent that in the next 2 weeks, we fully intend to challenge this legally. We will get legal opinion, and I think Jesse will have time to review it by the time we get to council. And my hope, we make a motion to remove that condition at the council action.
Which seems appropriate. Alderwoman.
Our biggest fear out here is timing. And the reason we did all this, we've spent a long time working with DNR. You can see the dates of these letters and everything, and it's really to get started. We still intend on getting started out there. So, if it comes to the point that, okay, we have to go for, get an NSRP, the Natural Resources
NRPP.
Special Protection.
NRSE.
We would hope that at a staff level that we're able to start grading work out here. If we would propose to wrap this area in orange silt or orange fence and say, okay, we're not going to touch anything close to this until they start working on, we would be open to that if it comes to that. But it's more of a timing issue. Spending the whole summer with the Army Corps and the DNR, and then getting to now in September and saying, well, you got to start an NRPP project or process. That's more concerning to us, really, is the timing.
Alderman, City Engineer, Commissioner Haley.
Thank you. And I think that partially answers the question that I wanted to raise. And what was suggested just between you and the mayor now in terms of teasing out some more of these legal issues prior to going to council certainly seems reasonable to me. However, should number 10 of the conditions still apply and you'd be required to go for the NRSE, what's the contingency should the Environmental Commission not recommend that or not approve that?
Right, and it would be a rework of the grading through there somehow, or hard piping, boring. There's options. There's options. We look at it and say, that it's already been approved by DNR and looked over by their stormwater people, we would hope that it would be approved. If not, it's okay. What do we do around that?
Okay.
Commissioner Haley.
Friendly suggestion, just modify number 10 to read, upon the applicant obtaining a natural resource special exception if required by the city. We can spend the next 2 weeks figuring it out. We don't even even have to worry about council. At whatever point that determination is made as to whether it applies to the city's UDO and is required, then they move forward. Or is that too simple?
That makes,
I like simple.
I would be agreeable to that.
We
That
don't like
makes,
simple. I like simple.
I would be agreeable to that
So, Kevin, do this slower.
after the city
This
attorney.
will be up to the maker of the motion, but item 10,
Go ahead.
City attorney, and then Commissioner Haley still has the floor.
Then you have something of a vague,
Commissioner Haley still has the floor.
then you have something of a vague condition in the resolution, and if it's gonna be worked on, how about a motion to adopt the resolution recognizing further review by staff with regard to condition number 10? Regard to condition number 10.
I'll make that motion.
I can live with that.
Okay. So the motion. Glenn, did you have something? So the motion to recommend approval of a resolution conditionally approving a final plat for the villas at Cape Crossing, the estates at Cape Crossing subdivision, pending further review
Condition number 10.
of condition number 10 with staff,
By staff.
by staff, yeah. And that outlot for, ooh, you want to dedicate that right away?
I personally would like to see it dedicated. I was intending to start construction, although Common Council held off on hiring a design firm to do it. So regarding some of the other issues, our consultant has not started on it, but she did put together some concept plans where a building, parking lot and such would fit amongst the wetlands that we've delineated for the trail project. So I'll say that.
Okay.
Mayor, just for an additional condition, just to make clear the
I believe
dedication.
that was number one, option one was the dedication.
Number one, dedication, yep. I have a language for an additional condition to be added.
Okay.
As long, if we dedicate, we just have to make sure that the development agreement is updated to reference the value and
Cool
the
with
park
that.
offset.
Commissioner Haley.
I'll repeat the question I said before. Why does the city want it? You can't build anything on it. All the existing easements preclude structures. What we should do is ask the developer to grant us an easement through there for whatever purposes we need. But there's no reason for the city to own and maintain this. And our own UDO and the existing easements preclude any structures in those easement areas. And if you look at the map, it's everything but the tiny little corner. Topography goes up and down but the tiny little corner. Topography goes up and down. It just makes no sense. What we want is an easement or easements. And that's all a pleasant thing to ask the developer for. Why should we pay for a piece of property that has no value? I don't care what you paid for it. Something that's 95% encumbered with easements, or something that's 95% encumbered with easements has no value, very little value, because the easements are already there. So I don't want to debate this extensively. I think it's not in the city's interest to own that, to get involved with it. With all the stuff, having to go out and mark hotlines and things, it's easier. With all the stuff, having to go out and mark hotlines and things, it's easier to stand back and build a trail on an easement granted by the developer if that's the case. And it's much cheaper than buying overinflated property that you can't build on anyways. I'm not talking about the wetlands in the right-of-way because they don't own that, we don't own that. That's We Energy. Don't own that, we don't own that. That's We Energies. This is specific to the outlot. Why does the city want it?
Mr. City Engineer.
So I would, even if we don't build a parking lot and trailhead, it's still a good staging area to set up operations when we have to do moat. The reservation, that I would try to think through, and Administrator Spino's cap, trying to come up with actual real cash in the future would be difficult, as opposed to having dedicated now. Is we have, I don't want to say we have enough park impact fees, but we are struggling to spend our park. And obviously number three is just, yeah, I think we could do that as good or better than a homeowners association could depend on. So that's why I would say dedication is my favorite.
For the record, the reason why we're having difficult time spending our park impact fees is we never follow through on the projects we approve. Okay, let's try this again. Was there a motion, Ms. Hicks?
Yeah, we didn't take the motion. We never got to.
Regarding number 10?
Not regarding number 2. I had made the motion after Jesse repeated, after Jesse,
Regarding number 10.
oh, regarding number 10, yes. Yes.
Was there a second to the motion, Ms. Hicks? Are you? Wait, everybody. We have two things we have to take care of in one motion, all right? So let's try this again, seeing that there was no second to that motion. Is there a motion to recommend approval of a resolution conditionally approving a final plat for the villas at Cape Crossing, the estates at Cape Crossing subdivision, pending staff review of the
Condition number 10.
condition number 10, and a dedication of, was that lot 4?
Outlet 4.
Outlet 4. Was that lot 4?
Outlet 4.
Outlet 4 by the developer to the city. Is there such a motion?
That is my motion.
Seconded by Commissioner Leon. Discussion of that motion. Okay, let's try this. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Ms. Hicks, please call the roll.
Commissioner Hogan?
Aye.
Commissioner Burkhart?
Aye.
Commissioner Haley?
No.
City Engineer Morrow?
Aye.
Alderwoman Hanneman?
Aye.
Commissioner Leon?
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Leon?
Aye.
With that, local rules require 4 affirmatives. We have 5 affirmative votes and 1 no. Motion carries. Okay, so thanks, sir.
I need to depart.
Yes, thank you, sir. Okay. The one baseballism and false sign review for BPC Land Limited, LLC. Who's this?
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Rivera.
This is a sign review application for 2 building Ballpark Commons. So to be installed in the south elevation. This application needs to be presented to the Plan Commission because the Plan Development District require Plan Commission approval of signs and these 2 applications for this building. That's why this should be presented to you. With these 2 new signs, the overall sign area for this building, which will reach the maximum. So yeah, it's the baseball-ism sign and the false sign. For the applicant information, any new signs will not be permitted except with a variance approval. And staff is recommending approval of the application. The applicant revised the sign area to be under the maximum total sign area for this building. So staff recommending approval, and I'm happy to answer any question that you may have.
Questions from the commission?
I move approval.
Is there a motion? If that's a motion to adopt a resolution
Second.
approving also adopt a resolution
Second.
approving wall sign for baseballism store and both offices of Ballpark Commons Development, southwest corner of West Rawson Avenue and South Ballpark Drive, within the Ballpark Commons Sports Village Commercial Mixed-Use Area of Planned Development District Number 37, the Rock Sports Complex. It was Planned Development District Number 37, the Rock Sports Complex. It was made by Alderwoman Hanneman, second by City Engineer Morrow. Questions on the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. That came 5 ayes, no noes, and 1. 5 ayes, no noes, and 1 absent. The absent is Commissioner Leon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we go back to the fun things. Come up to the front, Rick. 5 minutes.
Taking a break.
All right. We said 5 minutes, it's been 8. Mr. Martin, well, okay. So, this is going to sound really bad, but can we do the fast version of this?
Yes.
Please? Thank you. Who's doing it?
So I think I'm going to this work in chat, and I think what I'd like to suggest is that we collectively go through this document and just identify what the pieces are and why they're there, so that everyone at least is clear on what the purpose that you're reading and where flag for yourselves, and then we can have a further conversation about what's going to need more time and what information you'll need to make your own decisions on the substance. Does that sound like a plan? So can we actually itself,
I think so.
rather than, I've got it here, okay. But you all have the Articles 1 through 4, okay. So we had talked about the general provisions, and as Ruben walked you through, this is basically setting out the legal purpose of an ordinance. What is it for? What's its intent? How is it interpreted? And then the issue of vested rights. So that's really just the basic foundation of any zoning. Article 2 establishes the zoning. This is a description of each of the zoning districts in terms of its overall purpose, its overall general purpose. Like I said, the elevator speech about what each of these are. Without getting into what the substance of these districts is in terms of dimensions and such, one of the charges to this team had been to try to bring consistency between zoning district and actual land use on the ground. Now, it's very clear that there needs to be more discussion of what the analysis was, where nonconformities are, but the intent of this is to give you a workable set of zoning districts. And I might suggest, if you have it, the non-redlined, to give you a set of zoning districts that actually reflects what's built, areas that are not built, or your commercial districts where there's a future vision moving in that, a tool to move in that direction. So that's what Article 2 does. At the end of it, it also, 4 of 5 under Article 2, it also sets out, and this is, any Wisconsin zoning code has to have this, zoning boundary determinations. There's always a problem somewhere. Murphy's Law rules in zoning, so you've got to have a process for determining boundaries. Split zoning of a new lot is prohibited, so that if a new lot is created, it's got to be in one zone. That is a very typical and very well-advised provision. So that's your basic, that's what this Article 2 does. It just says, these are our districts, this is their general purpose.
Doesn't contain any regulations.
No standards, no regulations.
As far as specifically what uses are allowed.
Correct. Article 3 is where we get into the specific area and bulk or dimensional standards for each of the districts. So this is where, and these are this pages 1 and 2 of 34. This is where we really start to talk about how big can stuff be? What are the required minimum dimensions of a lot? What are the maximum dimensions, height, bulk, coverage of buildings in each of those? Right now, you've got in your current UDO, you have some conflicts, there's some funky things, but on the whole, the direction and what was in the diagnostics was not to change much about what's already there. And what was in the diagnostics was not to change much about what's already there, if anything. So this is a reorganization based on these zoning districts, which again, we understand. We need to look at the maps, we need to understand them, but this is mostly reorganization into a table. So you've got minimum lot to understand them, but this is mostly reorganization into a table. So you've got minimum lot size, frontage, yards, building height, impervious surface. Those are your basics. Then you've got on pages 2 and 3.
Can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry to go into the weeds.
Then you've got on pages 2 and 3.
Can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry to go into the weeds, but the footnote on rear lot says the maximum of 10 feet shall be allowed for garages. So that means that your setback has got to be less than 10 feet from the lot line?
Okay, so I'm going to ask
So
you, because that's...
on the chart under 15-3.01A,
Yes, Ruben, he's looking right here, and that's not a usage that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, the step on our part, it should be minimum. The
Okay,
idea is
let's
there is
move
to
on.
encourage the garage to be in the rear yard by allowing it to be set back.
I got it. I just raised it.
Yeah.
We can move on.
Okay.
But thank you. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Pages
feel good.
up of 4. This is exceptions. This is stuff that's often in yards that isn't subject to the strict setbacks. And that's everything from flagpoles to rain barrels to awnings, uncovered stairs, air conditioning units, etc. This is all pretty standard. Yes.
Address fences, like privacy fences.
They have their own section
It does.
under
Okay.
general standards.
Wanted to make sure.
Yes.
Later in the ordinance.
Fences get their own, they get a lot of
We
real
can maybe
estate.
lead with that
Right.
chapter.
Yeah.
It's stacked one too. Okay, so is it at, because I think people would come here and look and say, doesn't say anything about fences. Where else would I go to look for that?
Sure.
And so at least have
Yes.
a directional to where that would be in the document.
Yes.
Yes, I think so.
Along with a Robert Frost quote,
Yeah.
I think. Okay.
Great, thanks.
All right. So pages, P's and C's, you mind your P's and C's in zoning, uses. This is setting out how the city of Franklin treats uses, and they are either permitted, which means we generally think it's a good idea, so long as it meets standards, it's a good idea in that zoning district. Means we generally think it's a good idea, so long as it meets standards, it's a good idea in that zoning district. Conditional, which means we really have to look at the particular proposal in the particular place to see if it's a good idea. The presumption is with the city, not the applicant. See if it's a good idea. The presumption is with the city, not the applicant. Temporary, which is an important way to have a tool to regulate temporary uses. Prohibited, which under Wisconsin law, anything that you don't make prohibited, which under Wisconsin law, anything that you don't make permitted is by definition prohibited. And then we have 5 is uses not listed. Every zoning code has to have some way for things that aren't quite a retail. Every zoning code has to have some way for things that aren't quite a retail or aren't quite defined to be able to make a determination. Is this close enough to our allowable uses to make that a good idea? My favorite one, I'm not making this up, Hackensack Meadowlands Zoning District in New Jersey. We got a proposal. My favorite one, I'm not making this up, Hackensack Meadowlands Zoning District in New Jersey. We got a proposal in for an equine aquatic rehabilitation facility.
Awesome.
So put the racehorse in the tank. Yep. Okay. Is it a veterinary clinic? Is it what is it? Nobody. Yep. Okay. Is it a veterinary clinic? Is it what is it? Nobody had a definition for it, and we wrote a memo that said, well, it's somewhere between a veterinary clinic and ancillary facility to a racetrack. That was our determination that it was an allowable use. Plus, we got to tour it, and that was really cool. So, That was our determination that it was an allowable use. Plus, we got to tour it, and that was really cool. So, that's what happens here.
Jamie,
Now,
where did the Ps and Cs come from?
okay, 99% of that is your existing code with a few tweaks, Ruben, that you'll need to go over. Existing code with a few tweaks, Ruben, that you'll need to go over.
Yeah, it's really, the table is consolidating and simplifying the
Your
existing use
regs.
categories.
All right, I
and
got
making
changes
them
for the future.
very distinct from one another, and pretty much treating everything as it is currently, making the translation.
Where does one find the SIC codes?
Okay, wait. All right. Let's all agree. The answer to the mayor's questions are 3 words or less.
Okay.
Mr. City Attorney.
Just to know, you've got the term conditional use in the title and the text.
Sorry, go ahead.
Another question.
Sure.
Under recreation, amusement, and lodging, we have lodging house and short-term rentals as permitted uses.
Circle.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
We're on it, we're on it, we're on it, we're on it. That currently are actually being used as long-term residents
Yep.
that are not zoned. And so the concern is that the way this is worded, so, and I don't know if we have to pull motels out as a special class.
Well, anything you see in here, this is setting it in a form where you can say, oh, wait a minute, we've got to work on that. The way generally in zoning that you get at issues like that is the combination of this table and your definitions. In the case of dealing with extended conditional use, usually,
Okay.
yeah.
What about Airbnb?
Short-term rental.
That's on here as permitted, and that ought not be permitted. So
You're gonna have to
I
tell me when you
suggest
found
that
that. Yeah.
going through these tables
Yes.
is going to be a conversation.
Absolutely.
So-
And a good use of your time as citizens and leaders in Franklin to really think about these.
So let's hold on that, but everybody make notes on their
Yep.
tables here. Patty, we've been through this before, so I've got lots on both pages, so
Yep.
thank you. JB?
Okay. All right, so that's a good place to focus, really good place to, okay. All right, so that's a good place to focus, really good place to, really think those through. Page 8 of 34 starts what we call the special district standards. And these can be written for any district. Right now, what you see standards. And these can be written for any district. Right now, what you see here is the start of specific standards for the St. Martin's Road Historic for treating that as a special district. And then on the next page, treating that as a special district. And then on the next page, you do have airport overlay for the very small part where that applies. 27th Street.
Where the old Walgreens is.
Yep, 27th Street.
Where the old Walgreens is.
Yep.
Doesn't show on a zoning map.
It shows on the airport plans. Yeah,
We reference it.
right.
Show up in the zoning map.
It doesn't need, it's an overlay, so it's not going to be on that colorful draft zoning map, but it definitely.
Points to the airport, the General Mitchell.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Page 10 through, my goodness, it takes up a lot of real estate. 10 through 34. Currently, provisions for floodplain management that are in a sort of narrative form that is, the city is a participant in the National Flood Insurance Program. You're able to get insurance. But that program is changing, and they're going to be much tougher because of the strong storms, because of the extent of the losses. Our friends at the DNR, in April of this year, published a new, was it 2.5 years of work? Fowler's asleep, so we can't ask him. How long did it take to develop the model ordinance? You worked on that for about 3 years? Yep. So Wisconsin has a brand-new, newly adopted model floodplain ordinance. And from an impact standpoint, it's the same land in Franklin. It's the same land in Franklin, but it's a lot more specific as to what information you need for a review, who is going to do the review, how you go through a letter of map amendment, how you make an application for a variance, what the floodproofing standards and elevation standards are, how you make an application for a variance, what the floodproofing standards and elevation standards are, which is why it takes up this many pages instead of 4 paragraphs. I would commend it to your reading. I have taken the pieces out of the model ordinance. Commend it to your reading. I have taken the pieces out of the model ordinance and put them into Franklin's format here. I don't know if any community has actually gone through the adoption process. Anytime you adopt floodplain regs, you have to notify. Anytime you adopt floodplain regs, you have to notify DNR. Then there's a notice to Fema. It is essential to have a minimum ordinance adopted for people here to be able to buy flood insurance. So it's important. This is the latest and greatest from DNR. This is their recommended ordinance. So that is the pages through here. If I were to characterize it, it says if you want to build something in the floodplain, you will need to hire an engineer who is certified in floodplain design. Does not have the specificity here. This also contains some language on floodproofing that from other work is now needed to certify that a structure is okay. So, yep.
Rather than zoning categories, because what we're showing on the maps is
Yep.
if it's encumbered with some form of these, then the whole parcel, as they're going by parcel boundaries rather than the quote delineated floodplain boundaries. And in essence, the reason I'm going there is because one, it's important, but
Yeah.
two, you could have 2 zonings on a property. And
There's
that was
no reason-
one of my biggest things
Yeah.
going through this.
No
that
reason not
why aren't
to.
those just overlays? And I
They
know we
can
don't
be.
generally like to do overlays because
Nope,
they're a little
these-
messy, but the
If you're
floodplain
good
stuff
with
should
them-
all be overlain with
Yep.
primary zoning underlying each parcel.
Can do.
Since we got a
Requires
break in
map
the action, something a little
Are
bit
you
more
going
human.
to get into recodification of other sections of your municipal code if you do that? I
Well,
don't
we're
know.
going to rezone the entire city, so it seems to me that's going to be a minor thing.
It's expensive. Okay. I'm
I
gonna-
just put it
staff-
out there. Go ahead. I just raised
Whatever
it as
you,
an issue.
I'm going to leave that one to your staff and your clerk. I would talk to your
Fair
clerk
enough.
first. Okay. So that is Article 3. And then we come to Article 4. And then we come to Article 4. Article 4 is a little bit of a catch-all, but this is a really important section to think about, again, in terms of quality of life issues. Article 4, action to think about, again, in terms of quality of life issues. Article 4, as reorganized, is standards that are specific to particular uses, regardless of what district they're in. So if, for example, townhouses are proposed to be allowed in certain residential districts. So if, for example, townhouses are proposed to be allowed in certain residential districts, the standards at the top of page 2 of 20 would apply to townhouses in any district where they are proposed. Same goes for multifamily. Same goes for each of proposed. Same goes for multifamily. Same goes for each of the different uses, cemeteries, campgrounds, lodging houses, short-term rentals. This is where you can add standards or conditions that you feel are needed to make these particular suitable within Franklin. How should those be addressed and accommodated? That's the point of this section. So things like a vehicle-related use, or car washes, animal boarding facility, kennel, or veterinary services. And so that's kind of what happens for this section. And Ruben, I don't know if there's any you want to particularly call attention to?
Some of the newer ones that we've proposed are for short-term rentals.
Right.
That's new because that is not regulated under the current UDO. That's a new use, so the use.
20, if you want to circle that one as new.
Yep.
That is actually existing. That is existing, yeah.
That's existing. Some of the residential use standards like duplexes and townhomes and multifamily buildings are new. Multifamily complexes are new to, and the purpose there, as JB was saying, is to regulate the appearance of those things and make sure they fit within neighborhoods and have an appearance from an appearance from off-site that sort of generates value in the community. Many of these are from the existing UDO. So things like cemeteries,
Artisan
landfills.
manufacturing is new.
Artisan manufacturing is new. That is a new use that we've added to the permitted use, the regulated use tables. Things like solar farms are new. Wind farms are new on page 11 now.
One that is really important because we normally receive inquiries is the food truck court.
Food truck court, yep.
Accessory dwelling units are new.
Okay, and that's the bottom of page 13 of 20. Yes.
Yep.
Mayor?
And sort of along the same line. Yeah.
Something I'd like to raise, and I don't know that it's ever been brought up before, but I'm on page 7 of 20, where we're talking about vehicle fuel sales. I don't believe at this point in the city of Franklin we have, and I think that's something, regardless of how you feel on the matter, it's something that is we're going to see more of in the future, and I think we need to be prepared.
Okay. Generally, I put those, I don't know what you guys are doing, I put them in the parking standards.
That's where we
Yeah.
have, I think we haven't discussed it.
It's not discharged equally.
But in terms of what a zoning ordinance would say about EV chargers would be if you want to, those who
I'm
propose.
not looking at that necessarily,
Yeah.
but I'm foreseeing times in the future where your local gas station may also offer EV charging stations.
And some already do. Not in Franklin, but.
No.
Just, yep.
But it is coming down the line.
Yes.
I think the city engineer, that's a lamp, not a light bulb. So,
Yeah, but your fuel pump.
don't.
Yeah, okay, I won't go there. But that's something that I think we should look at and raise and craft into that.
Well, I guess my point is that you will have people drive to a certain spot. So this is be more than just, say, somebody lives in an apartment complex where you have that.
Right.
Because we were talking about maybe the library or city hall even where, if you drive an electric car, there's a charging station, so that's where you would go. And so I would think that where you anticipate people coming and going like you would a gas station might be, residents who live somewhere.
Okay, so two things. That's true, and that already exists. You can drive a Tesla cross-country now. You go from charging hangout to charging hangout to charging hangout. I see them in two places. One, they're in a lot of parking lots, but in stations or convenience retail can add 6 Tesla chargers, and then you've got people hanging out, getting coffee while they zap their vehicle and move along. We can take a look at that. I know Tucson just wrote a new chunk of regs for that.
And offer something. The differentiation that the city engineer brings up is important only for liquid fuel requirements. So I would suggest that you make D vehicle liquid fuel standards.
All right, that works.
And I would lump hydrogen in with liquid fuel because there's a danger to it.
But it's a gas, it's not a liquid, is it?
It comes from a liquid. They take water and generate hydrogen.
I'm so not a chemist.
So
It will be there someday.
the issue is danger and transfer rather than.
Can we just call this one vehicle fuel sales? I mean, yeah.
I guess my,
And then just have a section on electrical charging stations?
That would really be an accessory use to, or I think, okay.
I agree with that, but
sort that
the
out.
point is let's not make an assumption that it'll always take it because the technology changes. Can we move on? You get the issue, let's move on.
I'm sorry.
Anybody object to moving on? Glenn?
no. I'll get out of here.
Okay, so JB's talking, Ruben, sorry.
All right, nope, that's accessory dwellings, again, that's pages 13 all the way to 15. That you're going to want to think about in terms of, some communities I'm working in are making very generous allowances, recognizing that a lot of people want to be able to age in place. Mom and dad move into the accessory unit, and the kids and the grandkids take the big. I have one planning director client who spends most of her time doing that sort of estate planning, she calls it. So important to think about that one. Estate planning, she calls it. So important to think about that one.
One comment I would make.
Yep.
Your minimum sizes are very small. 720 square feet maximum. That's a garage space for a car.
Yep.
There ain't nobody living in that.
Says the guy on a huge lot.
I'm just saying, there ain't nobody living in that.
Says the guy on a huge lot.
I'm just saying,
No,
that
that's-
if we're doing accessory
yes.
structures, they should
Yes.
be reasonable. Nobody
Right.
will go to the effort of building a 700 square foot.
Right.
That's not even a
So
bedroom.
that is a policy choice. That one is on lots of an acre or less. That one is on lots of an acre or less.
Tiny homes are big.
Tiny homes can be big.
What's an oxymoron?
No, that was a qualitative statement, not a size statement.
Yes,
They're getting popular.
whatever, but they're,
They're getting popular.
whatever, but they're, again, I've got communities where they want more. I've got one that's going to allow 3 houses of up to 1,000 square feet to count as one principal dwelling.
Wow.
To provide more flexibility. Feet to count as one principal dwelling.
Wow.
To provide more flexibility. It's really worth thinking about. But talk amongst yourselves. Look at your friends and neighbors. What do you think would be realistic sizes? And remember that there's a big distinction. This is something that Ruben's written in here already. Units with, and remember that there's a big distinction. This is something that Ruben's written in here already. Units within a house, where 900 square feet is often, or 30% of the interior floor space is often the maximum, so that you don't basically get a duplex. But accessory structures, duplex. But accessory structures, 2 stories at 500 square feet, there's a lot of different options. Are you cool with, and one thing, right now this is written so that if you have a detached, are you cool with, and one thing, right now this is written so that if you have a detached garage, you may not also do a detached accessory dwelling, but that's a policy decision too.
Yeah, the way you got it, you gotta put it up on top of the garage.
Right.
Yeah, it would have to.
Which I don't know how you get to, but, which I don't know how you get to, but
Oh,
you need at least a staircase on the outside.
there's nothing to prohibit that, or an interior, garages can be big too, in both senses. Large
I
and
note
popular.
on page
Okay.
16, donation drop boxes. Also noted in the zoning charges, special uses.
Okay,
And
yeah, because that,
Prohibited.
that can be
a
difficult.
lot more, yes. Home-based businesses likewise, you gotta be careful on that one.
Yes.
And that's the question.
page 17 is home-based business.
And that's the question I have, how do you ultimately differentiate, because so many people are working from home now?
Correct.
And maybe it's a problem looking for, or a solution looking for a problem?
We have that in now in our code, right?
Home occupation? Yeah.
Yeah.
We basically talk about how you can, the difference.
Yeah, I think the good one is condition number 2. I think that helps a lot.
Threshold for requiring a permit, or else, like you said, everybody would need a permit because everybody has worked from home. A threshold being outside clients, certain level of delivery, percent of the house used, or any off-site employee who regularly comes to you.
And maybe I need to read a little more carefully and cross-check, but where am I here on artisan? Is that in the previous section?
Yep, page 15.
Sorry, because so many artisans are home-based businesses, who sell on Etsy or have their own online websites. Does that merge with one another, conflict?
Yeah, how does that differ from home occupation?
I mean, I guess, and I'm just thinking within my own family, a basement workshop with several sergers, sewing machines, making what would generally be considered a craft, but is now generating like $50,000 a year in sales out of the basement. So is that an artisan shop? Is that a home-based business? And are these conflicting between the two?
Do you guys have a definition that you use, like in Oak Creek? Or?
Sounds like a
Yeah, we
bang.
do have a standard definition
Okay.
that I'm happy to share, but in general, the artisan workshop idea is that it involves the production of some kind of physical product on site and involves the use of equipment and that type of thing to do it, and a home occupation might be more of a service, more
So what good does it do to make things if you can't sell them? Now, I get you could use the internet or whatever, and you
Yeah.
certainly don't want a retail front.
You don't want
on
retail
store,
on
but
your store,
I-
yeah.
Right.
There needs to be a better definition of that.
Yeah.
Yep, so maybe your definition.
Yeah.
Okay.
are important there.
Yeah, I just, well,
Like an accountant that works out of his house kind of thing. An accountant that works out of his house, so as long as he doesn't bring people there, that'd be.
Right.
That would be.
Yep. Okay, so that's the content of 1 through 4. And then just looking ahead, which is materially important to this. And then the other big chunks of work are going to be what we call the general development standards, which is like landscaping and parking are two of the big ones, and fences. And then a lot of it is procedures. Hopefully everybody's got like a general orientation to this now of like where to focus. I would suggest really looking at the permitted and conditional uses and those special use standards and really thinking about where do these fit or not, what makes them fit or not. That's really important. What makes them fit or not. That's really important for you as the community's leaders.
So so my suggested, as you just mentioned, next step is that we each read these documents carefully, and any corrections or glaring error, errors be highlighted and given to Regulo.
Yep.
Including, do you want to start on the permitted and conditional uses?
Sure. Yeah.
Because now you're going to have.
Sure. Yeah.
Because now you're going to have a coordination issue, because there's potential here you get 7 different permitted and conditional uses for each one.
True.
So.
What if we had an informal meeting of the Plan Commission and staff and some others? What if we had an informal meeting of the Plan Commission and staff and some others and just talk through a lot of this stuff?
I'd be happy to do that.
Just rather than 7 of us say we want this, we don't want this, just sort of make up our minds and identify those.
Yeah, but if you notice a meeting that's,
Oh, it'd be noticed.
yeah,
Noticed.
yeah, that usually is fine. Yep.
What I would say, then we can interact and you can answer the question.
Sure.
Oh, well, let's do that. Or
Yeah.
Okay, so then back to my trying to sum it up. Everybody take a look at these documents, find the problems and the changes you want made. I'd like to do that probably, and you'd probably like to do that during the day sometime, if we could.
Whatever works. It's fine.
So, okay. You got that?
Yep.
You good?
We'll coordinate a formal, well, it has to be noticed at a meeting.
That sounds like good next steps, yeah.
JB?
Yep. Yeah.
Commissioner Haley, but push your button, please. So we didn't get your last comment, so.
No, it's the proposed zoning map. When we discussed this previously, I pointed out that where there were many inaccuracies in it. It didn't work. I actually marked up a map of my potential corrections and provided it to the former planning manager.
Okay.
It doesn't seem that got integrated.
Okay.
And the reason I keep bringing it up is, one, you want it to be right, but you're basing all of your percentages for non-conforming and things like that on lots that are not buildable. Conservation easements or deed restrictions that prohibit development on them, and yet you're showing them, for example, as residential. And they can never be sold or used for that.
Okay.
And we've got a bunch of it.
I'm not privy to the back and forth on the wheres. It's not necessary. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not necessarily. If there is a conservation easement on a property, it kind of doesn't matter what the zoning is. So it's
Understood.
Yeah.
My point is you're looking at these areas and.
Yes. So it's
Understood.
Yeah.
My point is you're looking at these areas and saying, well, we've got non-conforming properties here and there. Many of these are non-conforming for a reason, in that they've been pulled off the market. The point is
Okay.
zoning shouldn't matter. The point is
Okay.
zoning shouldn't matter. But when you go and you look at this and say, oh, there's all this land available in this area, for example, only to realize that it's not. It can never. It has deed restrictions that it can't be developed.
Okay.
And so that needs to just get plucked. Restrictions that it can't be developed.
Okay.
And so that needs to just get plucked out of the formula, and you just do it by coloring those whatever color it happens to be.
Well, they still need to have a zoning designation.
Correct. The argument would be is that it's park, not residential, because that's why.
Okay. I mean, that would. Okay. I mean, that would be
MMSD, you got green seams programs.
Yep.
They're busily acquiring
Sure.
lands, putting deed restrictions on that they can never be developed, including even a parking lot, and then giving them to entities. So that needs
Okay.
to be pulled out of the formula. Those are not developable properties.
Okay. Materially changing the zoning designation of those lots. That may be fine, but that would be.
Well, I'm just
you'd be
saying, let's find a
rezoning
different
them.
name for them. I mean, you're
Well-
not rezoning, but You need to, zoning will affix the real and the here now, but any individual can put deed restrictions on, for
Yeah.
example, development in the future.
Yeah.
So I want to point out that there are individual parcels that are totally restricted from being developed. For example, the waste management lands have that level of restriction, or the Green Seams program that you've referred to. But it's important to make the distinction that those are on residential properties, et cetera. So this is an important discussion to have, because the current draft does not reflect some of that reality of the constraints that conservation issues create in Franklin. We could consider an overlay. I think that constraint.
I think in most cases, you just label them as park and open space. I mean, you're completely missing the state land on 116th Street. There's 140 acres of DNR-owned land that allows for hunting and can never be developed because it was purchased with green seams. So I'm not suggesting we rezone it, but our maps ought to show that. As existing
Well,
park
but that's
and
a
open
different
space.
map. If you show a different color on a zoning map, you're implying that there is a different zoning district, that there's a different that there's a different allowance. Zoning maps should only show the zoning. The zoning maps should only show the zoning, the land use entitlement basis.
But then we shouldn't be doing calculations based upon available land for
I
future
don't
development.
believe that I don't believe that happened, Commissioner. That it was
That's what
really
was
looking
going
at,
to happen.
Well, that's an important, I think, Kevin,
Commissioner, that it was
That's what
really
was going
looking
to
at.
happen.
well, that's an important, I think, Kevin, he doesn't need me to speak for him.
Okay.
But that is an important distinction, that in order, if we're gonna do some ratios and calculations about land use and all that, we need to make sure that we understand exactly what the limitations are on the land that we're calculating. Exactly what the limitations are on the land that we're calculating. And that's, I think that's it, right?
Yeah, again, the map is one thing, but what we do with that information. The other glaring thing in this is the whole Root River corridor, which is owned by Milwaukee County Parks and will always be parks. It's owned by Milwaukee County Parks and will always be parks, is designated as floodway. Just as we talked before, those that are floodway should, but not the entire parcel. So you have to somehow show that overlay.
Well, but the floodway is the floodway. It doesn't follow parcel boundaries. Haven't mapped. No,
Well, somebody
Ruben
has.
didn't map anything.
Okay.
It's zoning has to follow. Sometimes it follows parcel boundaries, but where the zoning district is described by a natural feature, it's going to follow the boundaries of the natural feature. There's no conflict. There's nothing.
That's what I was getting at before. It should be an overlay. The underlying ownership and use of that property will always be park and recreation.
Okay.
But yet it's showing all as floodways, the whole lots. Show the parcel boundaries discrete with whatever their zoning is, and do overlays that then show the areas where there's actual flood. Complicated, but again, this is, as we plan for the future, it's not just a regulatory thing, it's a planning thing.
Right. So a planning map of that would be helpful. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, Marion.
I want to add an additional comment with this. One question I do have is we're working for the state listing all of the developable area, and it's generally prepared based on our understanding of the zoning map. So that feeds into this, that it's something to consider, that if a parcel is zoned, for example, there are properties that are zoned in the B districts on Loomis Road that are now designated as green seams properties. Do we want to consider rezoning them, and would that be appropriate? Because they cannot be developed.
I mean, that is a policy decision for your plan commission.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
That would be an active rezoning.
Right.
That would be an active rezoning that would say that we designate these permanently as park and open space.
And the offer that I had made previously was to help point out some of those compromised parcels that right here are showing as developable residential, for example, parcels. That right here are showing as developable residential, for example.
Well, again, I just want to say that zoning doesn't say that it's developable.
I know.
Right.
I understand.
So it's not showing as developable, it's just, that's the zoning designation, so,
Okay, anything else? So,
the zoning designation, so.
okay, anything else? So the next step is Regulo and Marion are gonna set up an actual, honest to gosh, work session. Only thing on the agenda, we'll run through these, correct any issues. We'll do the correct any issues. We'll do the Ps and Cs
Yep.
and move on.
What about remote participation for that? Yes, no?
We have to change the ordinance in order to allow that.
Okay, so no.
So I wouldn't say no, but it's not gonna happen.
Or earlier.
Yeah,
Separate
this is
meeting?
gonna be a one-item thing.
Yeah.
Because
Workshop.
I'm not gonna, and you come in your blue jeans or golf shirts or whatever you want, and get ready to work. I would. I don't see any objections. I would, Patty, with all due respect, I would prefer to do it during the day, during the week, because I don't get weeknights, and I don't get many days, so I want to keep, I'd be happy. Okay, that's fine. After 1:30.
In person with option to remote participation for anyone that is not.
We can't yet. We're talking about modifying or changing the
Oh,
ordinance, but we can't.
Right.
So, sorry. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Hogan and Haley, the H's say, let's do it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?